2 minutes ago, a transfer meant to happen quietly turns into a royal flashpoint. King Charles authorizes Queen Elizabeth's jewelry to be sent to Camilla's daughter. No cameras, no ceremony, just a discreet handoff that would become permanent. But Princess Anne stops it. Not with theatrics. With one decisive move that makes every aide in the room go rigid. Because the Queen's jewelry isn't just inheritance, it's history. And if Anne is willing to block the King himself, it means something about this gift crosses a line the Crown cannot afford to cross. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It begins like so many palace decisions begin quietly, confidently, wrapped in the assumption that no one will challenge it, because challenging it would be unthinkable. There are no public schedules, no announcements, no cameras waiting to capture the moment. Just a discreet instruction moving through private secretaries and trusted hands. A simple plan that would leave no fingerprints except the one that matters, the jewelry leaving the Queen's orbit forever. And that is exactly why the air changes when Anne intervenes, because she understands what the palace tries to pretend isn't happening. This isn't just a family gift, it is a transfer of meaning. The jewelry is framed as routine generosity, something warm, something personal, something meant to soften the edges of a modern monarchy. But Anne doesn't treat it as warm, she treats it as radioactive. Her refusal lands with an odd mix of protection and accusation, as if she's shielding the late Queen's legacy while simultaneously calling out the motive behind the timing. In that single move, she turns a gesture into a question. Why now? Why discreetly? Why rushed? And Charles's reaction answers without speaking. He looks like a man who expected obedience, not resistance, like someone who has been pushed into a decision and didn't anticipate being forced to defend it. Because the Queen's jewelry isn't just diamonds and metal, it's the ownership of memory. Pieces worn at moments that shaped the nation. Photographed into history. Linked to the late Queen's identity so tightly that the objects become symbols the public feels, even without knowing why. And Anne knows something else too. Once those pieces are seen on someone new, the story changes. The public begins to accept a new belonging, a new closeness, a new right to stand in a legacy that was never meant to be casually shared. That is why her voice isn't emotional. It's firm, almost cold, like someone stopping a flood before it breaks through a wall. The panic that follows is immediate, and it's telling. Security shifts posture without explanation. Courtiers begin moving with purpose, not politeness. Private secretaries scramble to contain the moment, because nothing terrifies an institution like an unexpected no from someone who understands the rules better than the people trying to bend them. Phones start lighting up. Names get checked. Instructions are repeated, then revised. The atmosphere turns into soft, lockdown tight voices, careful language, the kind of sudden caution that screams, "This is bigger than it looks." And beneath all of that is the foreshadow that Anne's calm suggests. She doesn't just stop the transfer because she feels it's wrong. She stops it like she knows it's planned. Like there's a document somewhere, an instruction, an authorization, a trail proving this wasn't a spontaneous act of kindness. It was arranged. Intended. Positioned. That suspicion spreads instantly among the people trained to smell strategy. Why would a transfer that is supposedly sentimental require speed? Why would it be routed so quietly? Why would it be treated like something that must happen before anyone can object? Then Anne drops the line that makes the room feel smaller. Once it leaves, it never comes back. It's a warning that works on two levels at once. Literally, yes, objects removed from the Queen's custody become nearly impossible to reclaim without scandal. But symbolically, it's worse. Once the jewelry is worn by Camilla's daughter, the meaning is transferred too. The public begins to accept a new truth, and the monarchy becomes trapped by its own image. Anne is not just blocking a shipment, she is blocking a rewrite, Charles tries to hold on to the soft framing a family gesture, a kind thought, no need for drama. But Anne's expression doesn't change, because she knows exactly what that phrase is meant to do. It's meant to make her refusal look petty, emotional, cruel. And Anne is too seasoned to fall into that trap. She holds the line like someone protecting a boundary that should never have been tested in the first place. And as Charles tries to call it a family gesture, Anne's next sentence exposes what this really was positioning. People think jewellery is sentimental. In royal life, it's a statement. The Queen's pieces aren't just diamonds, they're continuity. They're photographed into history, worn at moments that shaped the nation, and remembered as part of the Crown's identity. That's why Anne sees the danger instantly. Sending those jewels to Camilla's daughter doesn't just share wealth. It quietly rewrites who belongs inside the royal legacy and who gets erased from it. Because those pieces are not pretty. They are royal memory. They carry the late Queen's identity in a way the public can feel without ever being told. A certain brooch becomes an era. A certain necklace becomes a moment of mourning, a moment of triumph, a moment of national steadiness. That's why this transfer is so volatile. On the surface, it's private generosity. Underneath, it is a silent endorsement of Camilla's family line, a message delivered without speeches, without votes, without asking anyone's permission. And once that message is seen, it becomes harder to unwind than any scandal. That is also why Camilla's daughter is such a sensitive figure in this symbolic battlefield. Not because of personal worth, but because of what it represents, outside becoming inside by symbolism alone. The monarchy has always guarded its inner sanctum not just with titles, but with access: who gets to wear what, who is photographed with which heirloom, who is allowed to look like they belong. Anne understands that if the Queen's jewellery crosses into Camilla's daughter's possession, it doesn't just change ownership, it changes perception. It moves the boundary of belonging, and once a boundary moves publicly, it rarely moves back without blood. Anne's line is simple and brutal. Legacy is not a bargaining chip. She isn't being sentimental. She's being strategic in the oldest sense. Because she can feel what this transfer is trying to accomplish, anchoring Camilla's bloodline into the Queen's memory so tightly that separating them later would look like cruelty. And that's the foreshadow that hangs over every word. A plan exists for future appearances using the jewels. Not just private wear. Not just safe storage. A carefully chosen moment where the public sees what it is supposed to accept as natural. The palace fears backlash for the same reason Anne fears permanence. If the public reads this as rewriting the Queen's will, rewriting her intentions, then it becomes a moral crisis, not a gossip cycle. It becomes a question of whether Charles is protecting his mother's legacy or converting it into a tool for someone else's legitimacy. And Anne implies something that makes the air go cold. The late Queen left strict intentions for these pieces. Not vague wishes, not family sentiment, intentions. Boundaries. A line. The moment Anne blocks the transfer, the palace doesn't argue in public. It retreats into paperwork. Because in royal life, legality is often the weapon used to disguise power. Within minutes, private secretaries demand vault logs, custodial records, and written authorization, anything that proves the king can do this without detonating a scandal. But Anne doesn't blink. She wants the one thing the palace fears: clarity. What exactly is this jewellery considered? Personal property? Crown property? Held in trust for future generations? The answers matter because the monarchy survives by blurring those categories when convenient and sharpening them when threatened. Vault protocols suddenly become sacred text. Who can authorize removal? Who signs? Who witnesses? What is recorded? Advisors split: instantly protect Charles's authority or protect the late Queen's legacy. Some argue the king must be obeyed. Others argue the crown must be protected from an irreversible mistake. And hovering over all of it is the detail that makes people move faster. A memo exists ordering the transfer today. That today is the tell. Charles is under pressure. Someone is pushing for speed to prevent interference. Speed is a tactic. It is how you move something through before the people with principles can arrive and say no. But Anne is the wrong person to rush. She knows the system and the people inside it. She knows which secretary keeps what record. She knows how the vault is logged. She knows where the truth would be buried if the palace had time to bury it. That's why she forces everything into the open, not with emotion, but with procedure. If they want to call it routine, then let it survive routine scrutiny. Then comes the moment that changes the tone from tense to dangerous. An aide finds a discrepancy in the inventory log, a missing notation, a mismatched entry, a detail that suggests the paperwork has been handled unusually. And suddenly, the question is no longer can the king do this? It's why does it look like someone tried to make this easier than it should be? And once Anne invokes the late queen's intentions, the palace stops calling it generosity and starts calling lawyers. And just when Charles expects the papers to end it, Anne reveals the real problem isn't legality, it's motive. Camilla doesn't need to fight Anne directly. She only needs to isolate her. Within hours, the palace atmosphere shifts, calls go unanswered, allies turn cautious, and whispers frame Anne as bitter, controlling and cruel. The narrative becomes, Anne is blocking family unity. But that's a mask. Because if Anne is right, this isn't about unity. It's about takeover one heirloom at a time. The retaliation doesn't look like a confrontation. It looks like air being quietly removed from a room. Schedules are changed without explanation. Staff are reassigned in ways that seem administrative until you realize they sever Anne from the people who normally keep her informed. Access tightens, not officially, not dramatically. Just enough that every corridor feels like it has a new gatekeeper. Doors that used to open with familiarity now require confirmation. Conversations that used to happen freely now happen through intermediaries. That's how soft domination works. You don't break someone with noise. You shrink their world until silence feels like obedience. And while Anne's world shrinks, a smear campaign begins to grow. Not with headlines. With whispers. The kind of whispers that sound like concern and carry poison anyway. Anne is painted as cold and possessive, as if safeguarding the late queen's legacy is some petty act of jealousy. She can't let go. She's bitter. She wants to control everything. The cruelty of it is how perfectly it's designed. If Anne stays firm, she looks stubborn. If she softens, she looks guilty. It forces courtiers to hedge, and in the palace, hedging is betrayal, dressed up as neutrality. People who used to support her suddenly become busy. People who used to speak plainly now smile and say nothing. Then comes the foreshadow that makes Anne's stomach turn. A public event is being shaped in the background, something warm, something glossy, something that showcases Camilla's family anyway. Not necessarily with the exact jewels, but with the same message, belonging. Acceptance. A new inner circle. It's an end run around Anne's boundary, an attempt to win the optics even if the vault stays closed. Anne can feel the intention behind it like a cold hand. If they can't take the heirloom, they'll take the image. If they can't win the object, they'll win the story. The emotional stakes hit hard, because Anne understands what it means to be isolated inside the institution she has served her entire life. She feels alone, but she refuses to fold. That refusal is both her strength and her danger, because the palace does not forgive stubbornness when it interferes with someone else's agenda. Charles is pressured to restore harmony by overriding Anne, and the pressure comes in soft language that hides sharp demands. For the family, for unity, for the king's peace. Anne hears the trap, override her, and the transfer becomes inevitable. Stand with her, and the king looks weak. Either way, someone loses face. Then the darkest move appears. Anne learns a witness has been coached, someone prepared to claim she overreacted, that she misunderstood, that she caused unnecessary drama. It's reputation warfare, and it is designed to do one thing: make Anne's judgment look unstable so her boundary can be dismissed as emotion. And in that moment, Anne realizes this fight is no longer about whether the jewels leave the vault. It's about whether she can be made to look like the villain for stopping them. And as Anne is pushed toward the edge, she makes a move no one expects. She calls William. William doesn't enter this quietly. He enters it like a future king who suddenly realizes the rules are being rewritten behind his back. When Anne calls, she doesn't plead, she warns. And William listens, because he knows jewelry is never just jewelry. It's symbols, it's access, it's permission. If Camilla's daughter receives the Queen's pieces, it sends a message that the monarchy has accepted a new lineage into its inner sanctum. William's suspicion ignites instantly. Why now? Why secretly? Why rushed? Those three questions alone tell him this isn't sentimental, it's strategic. And the emotional conflict hits at the core. Charles may see it as love, as a gesture meant to smooth the family's shape. But William sees institutional risk, because the crown's legitimacy is not built on affection. It's built on boundaries that the public believes still exist. Catherine becomes a quiet force in his mind too, because she recognizes optics and legacy warfare the way others recognize weather. She can sense it before it arrives, and she knows once an image lands, undoing it becomes a national humiliation. The deeper William looks, the more he suspects there's a bigger trade happening behind the scenes, something being exchanged, something being positioned, something being cemented through symbols rather than announcements. He demands documentation and chain of custody clarity, because that's how you stop a palace machine, you force it into the light. And as he does, factions harden even further, protect Charles and Camilla, or protect the future crown from a quiet rewrite that will haunt it later. Then the clue that shifts everything surfaces. William discovers the jewels were intended for a public moment, not a private handoff, not a harmless gift. A staged image designed to make belonging look natural, permanent, beyond dispute. And that is when William's tone changes from concern to resolve, because he understands the truth Anne has been holding alone. This isn't about jewels. It's about history being rewritten in real time. And once William realizes there's a planned image, the fight stops being about jewels and becomes about history. This is where the truth becomes unbearable. The transfer wasn't meant to stay private. It was meant to be seen. A carefully staged family moment with Camilla's daughter wearing the Queen's jewelry, soft lighting, warm smiles, and an unspoken message: she belongs. Once that image exists, it becomes history, and challenging it later would look like cruelty. Anne understood that. William confirms it. And now the palace panics, because evidence starts appearing in the ugliest way possible, not as one clean confession, but as a trail of tiny certainties that add up to something undeniable. Timing notes that are too precise, approvals that were logged too early, a photographer listed as if they just happened to be available by chance. Wardrobe cues discussed with the quiet seriousness of strategy, not family sentiment. The plan is revealed by its own perfection. Nothing about it is accidental. Nothing about it is warm. Its legacy anchoring disguised as affection, and the palace knows that once this is seen clearly, the word gift becomes a lie. The public story was always going to be simple: a loving family gesture, a graceful inclusion, a soft image meant to calm the country. But the private intent is sharper, to take the late Queen's royal memory and wrap it around Camilla's bloodline until the nation forgets there was ever a boundary. That is why the looming date turns into a deadline. The moment has to happen before dissent gains momentum, before questions become headlines, before Anne's refusal spreads into precedent. Pressure spikes again, and you can feel it in the way people move faster, quieter, more urgent, because urgency is the palace's favorite weapon. Urgency prevents debate. Urgency prevents conscience. Then comes the twist that makes the entire machine look fragile. Someone made a paperwork mistake exposing the plan. A copy sent too widely. A note filed under the wrong code. An inventory reference that doesn't match the supposed routine explanation. It's small, almost laughable, except it blows the cover clean off. And the moment that cover tears, the emotional weight of Anne's refusal changes shape. It stops looking like stubbornness and becomes what it always was, protection of the late Queen's memory. Not jealousy, not possessiveness, protection. Charles finally sees the trap for what it is. He realizes he is being pulled into a narrative that would lock him into a public endorsement he cannot easily reverse. If the image happens, he becomes part of it. If he allows it, he is the king who let his mother's legacy be used as a stamp for someone else's line. And if he stops it, he humiliates Camilla publicly and privately, exposing the limit of her influence in the one way she cannot tolerate, in symbolism. Anne doesn't soften when she sees Charles wrestling with it. She presses harder, because she knows this is the last moment where stopping it is still possible. And then she says the sentence that turns the air to ice. The late Queen explicitly forbade this. Not discouraged. Not preferred otherwise. Forbade. A word with teeth. A word that implies a direct instruction, an intention that was never meant to be negotiated after her death. And when Anne says the late Queen forbade it, Charles goes silent because he knows what it would mean if she's right. Charles has spent his life trying to hold two worlds together, the woman he loves and the monarchy that demands sacrifice. But Anne forces the collision. If he pushes the transfer through, he risks dishonoring his mother's legacy and splitting the family permanently. If he stops it, he humiliates Camilla and exposes the fact that her influence has limits. And the palace doesn't care about his feelings, it cares about what survives. You can feel Charles' guilt and grief collide with duty in the way he hesitates, not because he is weak, but because he is trapped between two kinds of loss. Advisors fracture into camps, contain the story at all costs, or honor the late Queen's intentions before the crown stains itself. Camilla's camp pushes for replacement optics immediately, a new staged moment to restore dominance, because they understand that if the first image fails, another one must be engineered or the narrative collapses. And behind the scenes, a last-minute intervention attempt forms. Someone tries to force Charles' hand, framing it as stability, unity, national interest. The old pressure. The same trick, just louder now. Trust inside the family cracks wider. William watches in silence, absorbing every move, while Anne quietly positions proof in case the palace tries to gaslight the public later. Because they understand something Charles doesn't want to admit yet, once the machine chooses optics, it will need someone to blame. And if it can't blame Anne, it will blame the future. Charles finally hints at what he has been afraid to say. The late Queen left a line that cannot be crossed. Not as rumour, as reality. And that hint is catastrophic, because it means there is an instruction that outranks emotion, outranks convenience, outranks even the desire to keep peace inside the marriage. It means there is a boundary that was supposed to survive the Queen herself. And the moment Charles admits that line exists, Camilla stops asking and starts campaigning. Camilla doesn't need a public fight to punish a private defeat. She moves like a shadow alliance's shift. Invitations vanish, and suddenly Anne feels the palace turning colder. The story becomes, Anne is jealous, Anne is bitter, Anne is humiliating the king. But beneath that story is the real threat. If Anne can stop the jewels, she can stop the future, and Camilla will not allow that. The intimidation is never announced, it's felt. Calls that once went through get filtered. Familiar staff quietly disappear from Anne's orbit. Access tightens in the smallest ways that cut the deepest rooms that require confirmation. Meetings that are suddenly full. Conversations that now happen without her and get summarized afterward like she's a guest in her own house. Soft domination intensifies until the message is unmistakable. Fall in line, or live in isolation. And the cruel genius of it is that no one can point to a single act and call it punishment. It's just the palace moving on without you. Neutrals choose silence to stay safe, which is how Camilla's power grows without ever raising her voice. People who privately agree with Anne stop returning messages. People who used to nod support now look away. Even simple courtesy turns cautious, as if sympathy itself is being monitored. And while Anne is being quietly minimized, Camilla's camp prepares a public moment anyway, because if they can't win the vault, they'll win the story. A glossy appearance, a curated warmth, a carefully placed image that suggests belonging and acceptance, even if the jewels remain locked away. It's dominance by implication, the kind that rewrites reality without ever admitting it's rewriting anything. In the middle of it all, the king's role becomes the question nobody dares to ask out loud. Is Charles containing Anne to keep peace inside the marriage and the institution? Or is he protecting Camilla because he believes the price of humiliating her is too high? His silence doesn't calm the palace, it destabilizes it. Because silence forces everyone to guess. And when people guess, they choose the side that feels safest. That is how uncertainty becomes a weapon. Then William becomes a target not directly, not publicly, but through that familiar palace language that sounds reasonable until you hear the threat behind it. Stand down for unity. Don't deepen the fracture. Think of the crown. The pressure is designed to make him doubt his own instincts, to make him fear that protecting Anne will look like rebellion against his father. And somewhere in the shadows, a leak is planned to paint Anne as unstable and overreaction, a misunderstanding, a sister who can't move on. If they can't defeat her boundary, they will destroy the credibility of the person who drew it. Anne senses it before it lands, and that is where the story turns dangerous. Because she reveals she anticipated this. She has a countermove, not loud, not reckless, precise. She has the kind of evidence that makes leaks backfire and makes concern look like manipulation. She has paperwork, timing, chain of custody traces that show motive hiding behind sentiment. The palace thinks it can bury her. Anne knows the palace can be forced to face daylight. And just when Camilla expects Anne to retreat into duty, Anne does the opposite. She prepares to expose the plan. The jewelry never leaves the vault. But the damage does. Anne's refusal becomes a public boundary even without a headline, because insiders feel the shockwave. Camilla is cornered, retreat quietly or escalate, and risk a scandal that stains the late Queen's memory. Charles stands between them, silent, haunted, forced to choose what matters more, love or legacy. And somewhere in the paperwork is one detail that could change everything. Symbolism becomes louder than speeches now. A locked vault becomes a message. A refusal becomes a line drawn through the palace itself. Anne's move threatens the protective machine around Camilla, because the machine relies on momentum, on people accepting that what is planned will happen simply because it is planned. But momentum dies when proof appears, and Anne has positioned that proof to surface at the worst possible moment, when denial would look like panic, and retaliation would look like confession. Sophie and William fear collateral damage but hold the line, because they understand the larger truth. If the late Queen's memory can be used as a prop, then nothing is sacred. A final intervention looms. Someone close to Charles may try to stop exposure with soft threats and desperate appeals, because the palace always prefers silence to truth. Camilla's last option narrows into a fork she cannot escape: retreat and accept the limit, or escalate and risk a public unraveling that permanently stains the legacy she's trying to borrow. The cliffhanger doesn't arrive as a grand reveal. It arrives as a quiet certainty. The proof is hinted, not fully shown, but everyone who matters knows what it means. Someone is about to fall. Not because Anne wants revenge, but because the plan was never safe once it was seen clearly. And the most devastating part is this: whoever falls, the family won't return to what it was. The boundary has been drawn. The trust has been broken. The crown has been forced to show its teeth. And just when the palace thinks it can bury this, one final twist surfaces, because the jewels were never the prize, they were the proof. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.